the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee. My name is Kyle Evans-Gay. I am the chair of the committee this year. And before we get started today, I would just like to ask the committee members to briefly introduce themselves, and I'll call folks out to make it a little bit easier on Zoom. Representative Griffith is the first on my screen.
Good afternoon, Senator Gay. Thank you so much. I'm Krista Griffith. I represent the 12th district, and which covers North Wilmington, Greenville, and Hockessin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Spiegelman.
Representative Jeff Spiegelman, 11th District, Middletown, Odessa, Townsend, Smyrna, Clayton, Dover, Hartley, Marydale, Kenton, Camden, Wyoming, Camden, Wyoming.
Welcome. Senator Pennyjohn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Brian Pettyjohn, representing the 19th District in Sussex County. I'm not going to go through the names just of the towns like Representative Spiegelman did, but I have the heart of the county. How about that?
Fantastic. Representative Johnson.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Representative Kendra Johnson, 5th District, a little bit of Newark, a little bit of Bear, a little bit of Newcastle. Thank you.
Thank you. And our distinguished Vice Chair, Representative Dorsey Walker.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker, represent the 3rd District, which is the west side of Wilmington.
Welcome. And Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Stephanie Hansen. I represent the 10th Senate District, which is part of Middletown, part of Bear Glasgow, and a tiny little bit of Newark.
Welcome. And Senator Pinckney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Marie Pinckney. I am the senator for the 13th District. I have parts, but not all of anything, including Newark, Newcastle, and Bear.
Welcome. And Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Lyndon Yerrick, the 34th Representative District, encompassing most of Camden, Wyoming, all of Woodside, and half of Magnolia. Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome. And for the benefit of our guests today and the benefit of everyone watching, I would also like to ask the staff to introduce themselves.
My name is Mark Brainerd Jr. I am one of the 2 research analysts for the committee.
And I am Amanda McAtee. I'm the other research analyst for the committee.
I'm Holly Von Wagner. I'm the attorney for the committee.
I'm Natalie White. I'm the administrative specialist for the committee.
And hello, everyone. I'm Elliot Gray. I'm the legislative fellow for the committee.
Thank you and welcome. Thank you to all of our staff for being here. Your support is how this committee happens. So I hope everyone watching can appreciate that as much as we do. We'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. If you would take a few minutes to review those draft minutes. It was our January 25th, 2021 orientation meeting, and I will entertain a motion now to approve those minutes. Oh, we're going to pull them up. Perfect. I have them on my other screen.
Second.
The person who moved, was that Senator Pennyjohn?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Senator Pennyjohn. So Senator Pennyjohn moved and Representative Dorsey Walker seconded. If all those in favor could please signify by your silence. Any opposed, please unmute and speak. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on to our main agenda item for the day, which is the DVI holdover meeting. So Sandra Miller is here to present an update. I believe Debbie Talley is with her today. Director Miller, would you please take it away and start with an introduction of yourself and of Ms. Talley?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm Sandra Miller. I am the Division Director for the Division for the Visually Impaired. And with me today is Debbie Talley. She's the Deputy Director of the Division for the Visually Impaired. Good afternoon, Senator Evans-Gay, Representative Dorsey Walker, members of the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee, and any members of the public who may be tuning in today. Thank you for the opportunity to share some background about DVI and present our progress over the past year. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up our presentation. Is everybody able to see that? Okay, great. I need to just make sure I can move it. All right. The mission of DVI is to provide educational, vocational, and technical support to empower and foster independence for Delawareans with visual impairments. While DVI is a small division in Delaware state government, the services it provides to more than 3,300 Delawareans are life-altering. I wanted to provide a brief background for some of the newer committee members, if that's all right. Established in 1909 as the Commission for the Blind, DVI is the oldest agency in the state. Through the years, the commission became a division of DHSS and evolved to reflect the growing needs for specifically trained and educated instructors, counselors, and staff in visual impairments and blind services, and to provide specific individual services to the residents of Delaware who are visually impaired and blind. DVI currently works in partnership with consumers and the community to improve the safety, education, and employment of blind and visually impaired Delawareans. DVI provides a continuum of direct services, including itinerant education services, vocational rehabilitation, independent living, older blind services, orientation and mobility, assistive technology, and also serves as the state licensing authority under the Randolph-Shepard Act. In addition, DVI maintains a registry of over 3,300 Delawareans who are eligible to receive services should the need arise. DVI routinely communicates with the registry through an automated phone system to inform them of events, workshops, and special announcements, which has been particularly important during the COVID-19 pandemic. DVI began this journey in June of 2018 when we were selected by the Committee for Review. At our hearing in 2019, the committee established a task force comprised of stakeholders and members of the public to review the recommendations. The task force work resulted in 13 new recommendations that were presented during our holdover hearing in early 2020. Shortly after our hearing, the DVI director and deputy director, Debbie and I, were appointed to lead the division, and the state responded to the pandemic by closing the economy to slow the spread of COVID-19. The past 11 months have been uniquely challenging as we coordinated remote access for employees to work from home while simultaneously reinventing the way in which services were provided. But it has also been very rewarding to focus attention on the areas identified by the committee as we agree that they are critical to enhancing the services for people with visual impairments. Recommendation 3 is related to statutory updates. So related to our business enterprise program, which is authorized by the Randolph-Shepard Act of 1936, provides for priority rights for Delawareans who are legally blind to operate vending facilities on federal and other property. The BEP business operators were paid through the state payroll and pension system since the initiative was established in Delaware. Finalizing House Bill 301 to remove the vendors from state payroll was the final step to correcting the issue. DVI is grateful for the swift action of this committee to bring the program into compliance with federal law. The committee identified several other pieces of legislation that needed to be reviewed and updated, and we will continue to work with you to complete this process. Recommendation 4, the analysis of agency structure, staff, and funding. We are continually evaluating the areas of DVI that need more support, and as positions become vacant, we assess 1, should they be repurposed, or 2, if so, in what way will it best support the functions of the program? One example is the trainer educator position, which was developed to increase assistive technology supports to students in schools. Broadly, the position was designed to provide individualized services based on student needs, including assessment and evaluation, researching options for students, making recommendations and providing training, and helping to troubleshoot issues. Although the pandemic has impacted how DVI provides services, some students and families are agreeable to in-person services. When it's not possible, the trainer educator has been able to deliver trial equipment for use until a formal evaluation can be completed. She offers remote training and can recommend online resources for additional training and webinars. She maintains regular communication with students and families to keep them engaged during this unique time of remote learning, and has also been offering remote training to school personnel with plans to provide more in-person training to school staff once restrictions are lifted. DVI has also repurposed 2 positions within the VR program in order to provide more assistance with the career development and coordination of pre-employment transition services for students, as well as more career development for students and adults. DVI continues to participate in the Equitable Infrastructure Subcommittee, which is a work group within the Special Education Strategic Plan Advisory Council, you may know as SESPAC. This subcommittee has been presenting to stakeholders over the past several months a proposed plan for a statewide entity for students served through autism spectrum disorder, deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, and visual impairment programs. This is receiving a tremendous amount of support, and I will discuss this in more detail later in my presentation. As the only agency in Delaware responsible for providing comprehensive services to individuals who are visually impaired or blind, DVI has historically focused on serving the individual. The structure of our agency reflects this, with most of our positions requiring highly specialized technical skills. However, in order to truly provide comprehensive services, DVI must be a resource to more than just the individual directly impacted by vision loss. We recognize that our services have a much greater impact when we serve the community at large. In order to enhance our capacity to provide comprehensive, high-quality services, DVI has begun an organizational development initiative to evaluate our agency structure, identify needs, and develop comprehensive training and communication plans. Our training and communications director, who started in August of 2020, is assisting DVI leadership with aligning our goals and priorities with the DHSS strategic plan, and also to identify potential structural and funding needs for our agency. Recommendation number 5, agency staff and training. DVI started working with national experts on vocational rehabilitation, one of whom is the former commissioner for the Rehabilitation Services Administration, one who is a former fiscal staff for the Rehabilitation Services Administration, who oversees the vocational rehabilitation program. They have provided helpful interpretation of federal regulations, assisted with revising policies and procedures to ensure compliance with regulations, and are helping as we prepare for new reporting requirements. In January, we also started receiving assistance from the Vocational Rehabilitation Technical Assistance Center for Quality Management, which is the first technical assistance center funded by RSA to provide fiscal support to VR agencies. I think I can speak on behalf of all VR agencies across the country. We are all very thankful they finally did that. Between our consultants and the technical assistance centers, we're receiving targeted fiscal training, assistance with policies and procedures, as well as a complete analysis of our fiscal and case management systems to identify efficiencies and develop more automated systems for accurate tracking and reporting of our data. DVI's VR program acquired a learning management system called Yes LMS, and this is to enhance staff development. The system has 65 courses available and offers the option to add personalized programmatic training. We have begun to utilize the system to assign and track training for new and current VR staff. But given the role that our other DVI staff have with assisting individuals to prepare for and obtain employment, having this system allows for anyone to be cross-trained and understand how they contribute to and best support their consumers while they're going through the VR process. DVI is also working with the statewide training office to receive guidance on how to utilize more of the Delaware Learning Center for our own division's purpose. More features are available at no additional cost, so we've begun plans for key DVI personnel to be trained so that we can use the DLC more effectively for training all of our own staff. Finally, we're fortunate to have hired a training and communications director who has prior experience working as a training administrator with the Delaware Department of Labor, and more recently, a manager in training and organizational development at UCLA. Given her education and experience in organizational development, training, and communications, she is well suited to assist DVI with developing an agency-wide training plan, as well as work with individual programs to address their specific needs. Although DVI is a relatively small division, having several programs with specific training needs does create some challenges. However, having someone who's able to streamline training to meet specific program needs, as well as incorporate them into the larger agency plan, will assist us beyond training. It's going to help us inform our recruitment and retention efforts and address succession planning. We have plenty of ongoing work to do with regard to this initiative. However, our ability to achieve our goals and sustain the work is greater when we're thoughtful about our planning. We solicit input from staff and stakeholders, and then we can demonstrate the progress that we're making. Recommendation number 6, agency staff, policy and procedure manual. DVI completed a thorough review of agency policies and procedures, and we gathered resources from DHR, DHSS, as well as some other states. Policy gaps were identified and prioritized. Since the process began, DVI has developed a staff manual and several policies such as staff expectations, supervision, recruitment, consumer equity, confidentiality, and privacy, just to mention a few. Although DVI has made significant progress, we still have more work to do. Moving forward, we will continue to add policies and ensure our employees receive training and guidance as they're implemented. In addition, we plan to develop a system that outlines the proper maintenance of policies and procedures with ongoing review processes to include timelines, tools, and training. So recommendation is number 7 is very similar to number 6. This is related to creating an agency program-specific policy and procedure manual. So we conducted review of our service delivery policies for all of our programs, and again, identified gaps and then prioritized how we were going to proceed. The review proved that most programs were operating with comprehensive policies, but they needed updating. We needed to streamline content, and we just needed to improve the flow of information. Additional revisions will focus on corrections like identifying and eliminating redundancies of shared processes, such as like client intake. All of our programs do a client intake. We want to streamline that and make that as consistent as possible. And then also further refining, enhancing program processes. DVI focused attention on gaps in service-related policies and developed an outline of the future structure of DVI policy content. And then we have a list that we expect is going to evolve as we engage in further policy review. So some of the draft policies include accessible communication, accessing interpreter services, case documentation, case record review, confidentiality, informed consent, release of information, and so on. Our VR program did have policies and procedures in place. However, we identified an immediate need for a pre-employment transition services policy and also a longer-term need to thoroughly update the policy and program manual. So we completed the pre-ETS policy and trained staff in spring of 2020, and we contracted with national experts to perform a complete overhaul of our VR policies and procedures, and that work is currently underway. As I mentioned before, moving forward, we will ensure that our employees receive training and guidance as the policies are implemented and as we develop a team and a process for ensuring that they're continually updated, monitored, and relevant. Okay, recommendation number 8 is related to education services and funding. As I referenced earlier, DVI continues to participate in the Equitable Infrastructure Subcommittee and meet with stakeholders to present the proposed plan for creating an inclusive statewide system of support for students ages 0 to 21, served through the autism spectrum disorder, deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, and visual impairment programs. Student needs have increased in complexity and across disciplines. State programs function separately and levels of support are unaligned. Current systems do not account for growth, changes in student needs, training, or regular access to technical assistance. There have long been concerns about equity and consistency of services throughout the state and the ability to serve students in their home districts. This proposal provides a plan for creating a statewide entity that would combine all mentioned programs in order to share resources, expand expertise, and better serve students in their home districts. The entity would answer to a board of directors and be responsible for reporting to the Department of Education as any other LEA does. And additional benefits of this proposal include districts paying only for the specific services they need, services and technical assistance more readily available to LEAs, a decreased reliance on out-of-state consultants or private contractors, and increasing consistency and quality of services while also building local capacity. We're hoping that this could also serve as a blueprint for other high-need areas, such as mental health and respite, and some of those conversations have already started taking place. We continue to meet with stakeholders to present the concept and receive feedback. There has been a lot of support, but there's a lot more work to do to move this from a concept to an actionable plan. Some core next steps include developing funding and infrastructure plans and identifying legislative codes that changes that may need to take place. In the meantime, with regard to funding, I'm really happy to report that we've been working closely with the Department of Education and the local education agencies so that we can address specific student needs. Where challenges exist, the Department of Education has been extremely flexible to work with both DVI as well as the district to ensure high needs funding is available so that we are addressing student needs in very timely fashion. So that's been a good collaboration for all of us. Education services related to communication. DVI is working on several ways to improve our communication with the Department of Education, resulting in better collaboration and enhanced services for students and families. We have a really good partnership, and DVI and DOE meet regularly to ensure our agencies are operating in alignment and just to be more proactive about any potential issues that may need to be addressed. We continue to revise the MOU, although this process did slow due to the pandemic. The MOU is being updated with clear communication guidelines for DVI, local education agencies, and the Department of Education, including updated procedures related to services for students who are blind or visually impaired, clearly defining roles and responsibilities of DVI and the districts, especially in cases where a district has hired their own TVI, and then also updating procedures for DVI's involvement in the IEP process. In addition, DVI received technical assistance from the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center to meet federal requirements with regard to the sections of the MOU related to transition and pre-ETS and the partnership between vocational rehabilitation and education. So those recommendations will be incorporated into the revised MOU. Another way we believe we can improve communication is through the trainer educator position who's working with students. She's primarily working with high school students to improve communication and assist with the transition process. She coordinates with students, families, local education agencies, and DVI staff to ensure a team approach of services is being provided, both to meet the current needs of students as well as helping them plan for their post-high school goals. The DVI Organizational Development Initiative, which includes the development of a communications plan, is another way in which we will be addressing communication as an agency, but also for each specific program within DVI, so education included. This initiative will allow us to evaluate our current strategies and identify areas to enhance communication with external partners, which of course will include the Department of Education, local education agencies, and other education stakeholders and consultants. DVI was involved in the development of a department-wide constituent inquiry database. We expect that this will also have an impact on communication and help to improve services for students and families. In mid-2019, DHSS began developing its version of Salesforce, a constituent inquiry database compatible with the Governor's Office's database. This provides a more formalized process for accurate monitoring of each request from inception through completion, which can then provide valuable information to inform our decisions, ensure that the inquiries are followed through, and just improve communication and services in general. Finally, DVI's statewide education coordinator recently implemented the first DVI education coffee hour last month. These are being held to provide regular opportunities specifically for the local education agencies to ask questions, share concerns, and just learn more about DVI and visual disabilities. We're really excited that 3 districts participated, and I want to mention them because I think with everything going on right now, districts have their hands full. And it's very difficult to get people to find the time to participate in extra meetings. But Lake Forest, Seaford, and Smyrna all participated, and our education coordinator was really thrilled that they felt it was important to be there. The discussions will help to inform the MOU as well as improve just general communication with the districts. So each meeting will allow for questions, information sharing. Erin will be able to provide information about specific topics. She can demonstrate equipment, and then she can also invite guests as she understands what districts are looking for. So we're excited about that starting too. All right, accessibility of DVI offices. DVI currently has 4 office locations, 2 of which have technology training centers. One is the Herman Holloway campus in Newcastle County. The other is at the Stokely Center in Georgetown. 2 other offices provide space for staff who are primarily working out in the community. DVI focuses attention on the 2 that housed the assistive technology training centers. DHSS addressed the accessibility issue on the Herman Holloway campus during the summer of 2020. The campus underwent construction to improve curb cuts and add and repair sidewalks. The curb cuts and sidewalks were configured and repaved to ensure that pedestrians were afforded a safe, cane-friendly walkway from the fixed bus route stop to the DVI training center. And on the Herman Holloway campus, if you've ever been on it, you can imagine it is actually a fairly significant walk to get from the entrance to our building. The training center at Stokely proved to be a bit more challenging. Although it is accessible by paratransit, there are no fixed bus stops in the immediate area, and there are no sidewalks leading to the building. In order to implement timely change, DVI developed a partnership with the Delaware libraries to create a community-based, cost-neutral solution which affords consumers on fixed bus routes access to fully accessible locations. DVI formalized a partnership with the Georgetown Library and is in the process of organizing the space and adding equipment. The library has several private classrooms on the first floor and a reference desk with a computer on the second floor. The second floor is barely used, it's quiet, it's big, and there's an elevator. So DVI will be able to utilize that space to put some of our equipment. We can install screen readers on the desk computer. We can put Zoom text on the equipment if needed as well. Small portable devices will be kept in a locked cabinet on the second floor. The location is approximately 1 block from the fixed bus route, and the building is fully accessible. So in return for providing us free space, DVI intends to teach library staff to use the screen reading software as well as the desk magnifier so patrons with visual impairments have access to the tools and library staff will have the ability to assist them. In addition, DVI will have our independent living team add braille markers to the elevator, bookshelf ends, the front desk, and put some low-tech strategies into place so that the location itself can be a little more accessible. So DVI will incorporate community resources into remote training to encourage increased community integration. The library director will display DVI brochures, and both entities agreed to promote partnership on the website and social media. The pandemic has definitely slowed progress because of the closures. However, we were still able to get the agreement in place and plan. So now that they are getting to the point where they're opening by appointment only, we're able to move our equipment in and begin the collaboration. So the library director is very committed to the partnership, and we intend to research additional cost-neutral locations, including other libraries, possible WIO8 partner locations, maybe one-stops, in hopes to develop some additional training, remote training locations. In addition to improving physical accessibility for consumers, we recognize the importance of having adequate staffing to address our consumers' needs. So as I mentioned before, we repurposed a trainer educator position who focuses more on students and assisting the schools. And we also are in the process of bringing on a trainer educator to work out of the person would technically work out of the Georgetown site. However, we're going to be training them to do their trainings in all the different locations that we can have available. So primarily working in the library, but also any other locations that we're able to develop. The pandemic has impacted services across the state, but there are some lessons learned as well. Staff and consumers quickly adjusted to incorporate more remote teaching and learning in order to maintain critical services to consumers. Although not all services can be provided in a remote fashion and not all consumers are comfortable with that mode of instruction, we have noticed an increase in participation for some where meeting face-to-face was previously difficult for them. We've also seen increased participation at council meetings, more participation in workshops, and just general programming activities. DVI anticipates offering a hybrid approach to services in the future to provide consumers with more options for service delivery. In addition, the Council on the Blind has created a subcommittee to address the broader accessibility issues across the state and are looking to partner with other councils and agencies to look at how to ensure equal access for all Delawareans, which has become particularly important during the pandemic and as information is changing from day to day and is mostly available electronically. Okay, recommendation 11, boards, committees, or councils related to DVI. DVI is involved with many councils and committees related to the work that we do. However, we are not a member of the Governor's Advisory Council for Exceptional Citizens. We believe that this membership would be beneficial to both DVI as well as the council and also to the consumers that it represents. So we are pursuing membership on that council. One of our councils that has received a lot of attention over the past several months is the Vocational Rehabilitation Advisory Council, or VRAC, or as it's referred to in the federal regulations, the State Rehabilitation Council, or SRC. DVI's VR program was selected for monitoring by the Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA, and the 3 areas under review were fiscal, data, and state plan. The Delaware WIOA combined state plan was due on March 1st of 2020, shortly after Debbie and I were appointed to our positions. There are sections of the plan that are to be jointly developed with the SRC, and we were very upfront when we wrote our plan about not having an opportunity to work with the SRC. RSA reviewed our section of the plan and they placed a contingency on the Delaware WIOA combined state plan. After further review by RSA, they shared concerns about our council being in compliance with federal regulations related to term limits. And they noted that several members served well beyond the 2 3-year terms that are allowed by federal regulations. In order to address the contingency, DVI was required to submit a detailed plan and timeline for ensuring the state plan goals and priorities are jointly developed by the SRC and DVI. With the submission and approval of the DVI plan to jointly develop goals and priorities with the SRC, the contingency was removed in September. The plan that we have been working on includes the following steps. We need to constitute a state rehabilitation council in compliance with regulations at 34 CFR 361.17. We need to conduct a comprehensive statewide needs assessment, also known as the CSNA, with the SRC as described in 34 CFR 361. We need to review the findings derived from the CSNA with the SRC, and we want to have this completed by September 15th of 21. We need to conduct sessions with the SRC to jointly develop goals and priorities based on the information that we get from the comprehensive statewide needs assessment. We would like this completed by December 1 of 2021 so that we can submit a modified description L of the DVI VR portion of the Delaware WIOA combined state plan, which will be due March 1st of 2022. So we have a lot that we're working through. We began working on getting into compliance with the council immediately with assistance from the Office of Boards and Commissions and our Deputy Attorney General, who began attending our SRC meetings this past year. We've been working on filling vacancies as well as researching the 4 members who RSA identified as being out of compliance with term limits. So we're still trying to work through the issues of non-compliance, which have not been resolved yet. However, in the meantime, we have recruited 2 new members to join the SRC. The governor appointed one as chair of the council, and before she moved to Delaware, she actually ran vocational rehabilitation services for the blind in Maryland. So she comes with some really excellent experience. DVI will continue to work on the plan that was approved by RSA in order to jointly develop goals and priorities with the SRC and work with RSA to receive technical assistance if we encounter any delays or challenges. Additional steps included in the plan involve developing and offering training on public meetings and new member orientation in order for members to be more informed about the purpose of the council and their roles and responsibilities as members. We hope this will also result in easing recruitment for hard to fill positions and increasing participation. So I have just provided you with a whole lot of information. But before I finish, I just wanted to give a couple highlights because I need to acknowledge the staff of DVI. This year has been unique, I think, for everybody, but you know, we've been working through an awful lot, and I just need to acknowledge the DVI staff, in particular, Debbie, as well as our leadership team for maintaining operations, getting everybody working from home to the degree that they could, while at the same time prioritizing services, because so many of our services are in person, and you could say that they're kind of in direct conflict with the safety protocols of COVID-19. There's a lot of physical contact, close contact in order to provide the services that many of our consumers need. And our staff, they really didn't blink an eye to do that. They pivoted to work from home. They pivoted to provide remote services where they could, and they continue to provide in-person services and still do to make sure that our consumers received what they needed over the past year. So they've done it, you know, following safety protocols and being as careful as possible to keep everyone safe. So I just need to say that, you know, I think we've made a lot of progress, and I really want to thank the DVI team for all their hard work. Thank you, and I am happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Director Miller, and thank you for sharing that about your team. I think it demonstrates, you know, what this committee previously found, which was there's a lot of value in the services that DVI provides to your consumers and to Delawareans. And so I think we are all in awe of those who care for others and what they've done this pandemic. So thank you for sharing that about your team. I am going to give an opportunity for the committee to ask any questions or offer any comments. But before I do, I just want to note that just as a reminder to anyone who may be watching that there is an opportunity for you to submit a public comment written comments to Mark and Amanda, who you see here on the screen with us. And you can do that by emailing sunset@delaware.gov. So all of those comments will be shared with the committee members you see here and posted to the committee's website. But with that said, are there any comments or questions from the committee members? And Amanda, I'll ask you if you wouldn't mind to manage the queue. We'll get started with Representative Griffiths is the first one I see.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Miller, for that extensive presentation. I learned a lot. I have just two questions related, well, maybe three. First off, how many visually impaired individuals does the division employ?
How many visually impaired individuals do we employ?
Yes.
I have to think about that. I believe we have, at any given time, it's 7 to 10. So obviously there's staff turnover, but we have generally around 7 to 10 individuals.
All right, thank you for that. And this is
the time that I've been here.
And this is helpful for me because I'm relatively new to this committee, so I'm learning the process a little bit and also want to know more about your division.
Sure.
Other questions, generally I'd like to know sort of with your vocational rehab and your employment opportunities, can you describe or tell us some of the employment opportunities that, or the organizations or companies or corporations that work with you to employ visually impaired individuals?
So sure. So that's kind of a tough question only because we provide individualized services. And so we don't necessarily work specifically with any one company or organization. We work with the individuals who come for VR services and identify what their strengths and priorities are, what their training or education skills are, and then what their interests are. And we work with them to then identify employment opportunities that meet those. So we're really looking from the individual side of it, but we do provide services to employers as well in order to help with recruiting and retaining individuals who may either obtain employment and then lose their vision, or just to make sure that they acclimate to the job, have the technology they need, when they become employed. So really it's very individualized.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I'm a mom of a child with special needs, so I appreciate that individual approach. So if you could just walk me through that process. So, one of your employees would be assigned to an individual who's visually impaired, and then based on what their desires are for work, you would work with different corporations or companies or state employment, whatever it might be, to facilitate that process. Is that right?
That is correct. So when an individual comes to vocational rehabilitation, and our vocational rehabilitation provides services from 14 through however long a person is interested in being employed. So we have pre-employment transition services that someone could participate in without having to formally apply for VR services. And there are 5 core services that they could receive. And that is, they're qualified for those between the ages of 14 and 21, as long as they are a student with a disability and receiving IDEA services. If they apply for services, which they can do at 14, then they kind of get the whole gamut of VR services. And so typically what we're doing is, if they're a student or someone who's younger, we're going to help expose them to employment, give them opportunities to explore different types of employment, whatever the case may be. So work-based learning experiences, internships, having them go out for informational interviews. There are different programs that are available to them. So really at the younger ages, we're helping to explore and trying to partner with the education programs so that we're working in tandem to support the student for when they leave school. But generally speaking, everyone who comes to VR is going to get some type of an assessment. They could be, there's comprehensive assessments really taking place throughout the entire process, because you learn people as you get to know them better in different environments that you're meeting with them, and those types of things. But they're going to be getting some type of an assessment so that we see sort of where they're at, so we can kind of meet them where they're at. And then based on what they would like to do, we can either help them explore their options, identify maybe some education or training that might be needed in order for them to meet an employment objective. So we review labor market information, we'll review what it takes, to become or to meet whatever vocational goal that they might have. So we really do a lot of education, counseling, and those types of things so that they're making informed decisions along the way. Then we can support them. We do have, there is some financial contribution depending on the situation, but based on the individual and their disability and the services that are needed, we develop an individualized plan for employment. So if you're familiar with an IEP, I'm sorry.
Okay, yes. Okay. No, that helps. Then just a couple of follow up with that. Are there any individuals who are currently waiting employment? Do you have, or is are you having trouble finding matches for individuals in jobs? And approximately how many, of the population that you're working with, what's the percentage of that? And is there anything that we as legislators can do to help on that end?
So DVI, you may be aware that there are two different VR programs in Delaware. We serve individuals who are blind or visually impaired, and then the general agency serves other disabilities. We do work together as well, though. So our caseload, our division is much smaller than the general agency. So right now we have about 200 people on our VR caseload, and about 35 of them are actively seeking employment. It has definitely, the pandemic has definitely impacted services and people's ability to get jobs. However, we have still had some folks be successful with achieving employment. And quite frankly, I'm happy to report that some of those jobs have come from the state of Delaware. So that's extremely exciting. One of the things that we have started just recently is conversations with DHR, the general agency, and some other stakeholders, the Statewide Council for Persons with Disabilities, to talk about how to help get more individuals with disabilities into state employment. Part of that conversation is going to involve accessibility of the application process, the interview process, the types of systems people need to use when they are working, and just the ability to get people the equipment that they need when they start employment. And so that would be, so just, sort of managing that application process with the state. We have a lot of people who are interested in working for the state, and there's selective placement, which helps to prioritize people with disabilities, but that can be kind of a cumbersome process in and of itself.
Okay. My last question is related to, and this is just more curiosity than anything. When I was a deputy attorney general, I worked at the Carvel building, and I believe there was a little cafe that was run by the division. There are other locations I think that DVI had. What's the status of those? I think that one went away. I think for a while they were required to be there, or maybe it's still there. Can you help me understand where some of those, I remember visiting and eating lunch frequently. So if you could just update me on that.
Sure. I'll try to be brief in my comments. I apologize.
No, it's helpful. I just don't want to steal the time from my dear colleagues who I know the bit to ask questions too. That's all.
No, that's fine. So in the Carvel building, that's transitioning over into a Micromarket. So a lot of trends recently have moved away from cafeterias, especially related to the business enterprise program, and are moving more to Micromarkets. So there is one at Del Dot. There's one at, I can't think of there's two state agencies that have them. Del Dot's open to the public. In their Dover location. It's beautiful. I highly recommend it. May have it open so you can actually sit and work there. And it's a grab and go. So and we're working on ensuring that there's accessibility. So that is actually what is in progress at the Carvel building. They're going to be putting in a Micromarket there.
Oh, and so will some of the individuals you work with, the visually impaired, they'll be running it and working there. Is that right?
Well, the whole idea, yes, the whole idea. So there is a blind operator who has that location, and so he's working with those folks to get it up and running. But the whole idea of a Micromarket is really, it's kind of like what you have at the airport. When you just go up, all the food is there, and you can grab what you need, you swipe your card, and you go. So the biggest thing is really just making sure that it's accessible to everyone, not just someone who's blind or visually impaired, but to anybody with a disability. So, putting things in locations where they can reach them, making sure that when you check out, you're able to utilize the technology that is available, and those types of things.
Thank you so much, Ms. Miller. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm all done with my lengthy questions, Madam Chair. Thanks.
No problem. I see Amanda speaking, but I don't hear her, and I'm not sure if other people do. So I think Representative Yerrick is the next one up.
No, I'm sorry. Representative Dorsey Walker is next, and then
Okay.
Representative Yerrick. Sorry, I had my phone on. I was on double mute. Sorry.
Representative Dorsey Walker, if you're prepared to ask your questions. She may need a minute, so let's move to Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two comments. One, that you're addressing some of the accessibility concerns, especially at the Stokely Center in regard to visually impaired challenges for people to get to the facility, to take advantage of some of the job coaching, job training resources there. I know that was a pain point from last year. So glad to hear that you're addressing it. And the second thing is in regard to the educational opportunities, trying to have better coordination with the various school districts and the IEPs and the paras and the staff there, that I know you're a rather limited team, and trying to add value with all the different school districts in regard to a student who's visually impaired. I think that was some of the challenges from last year that I can remember the most often hearing about. For addressing those concerns about making it more accessible for the individuals to utilize your resource centers, and two, trying to be better engaged with the school districts in regard to their students that are visually impaired, working with their IEPs, their paras in the schools, and the support services that they provide. So thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Dorsey Walker, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. Just really quickly, you mentioned something about, Madam Director, you mentioned something about the coffees. What kind of participation did you have with those, and how was that publicized for the larger, broader community?
Are you talking about the coffee hour?
Yes.
Okay, so that just got off its feet last month for the first coffee hour, and it is specifically designed for local education agencies, so that there's an opportunity, a less formal opportunity than the special education director meetings and some of those other places where they have a very strict agenda that they're following. This was really a more informal way for the districts to have access to DVI, to ask questions, to talk about any concerns, to just learn more about the work that we do. And we actually, one of those districts that participated doesn't have a student that they're working with right now with a visual impairment, but they wanted information because they know that from year to year that changes. And so that was put out to districts, but our education coordinator has also been holding workshops for parents, and we're looking at expanding some of that as well, so that it might be information more specific to parents, but that more of the community would be able to participate. So we're looking at ways, especially now, finding that more people they seem to be more open and happy to participate after hours when we can do it, through Zoom and those types of things, instead of bringing people into all of our locations. And so we're finding that more people are participating through these opportunities.
Okay. And you mentioned the legislation on June 22nd, House Bill 301.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that because that's my actual birthday, so I'm kind of excited about that one. But what other legislation do you have in the works, or where you need assistance from We the Sunset Committee to move other initiatives forward legislatively?
Well, a lot of the legislation that was discussed is related to our education services. And so, and I have a list of them here. So we've got governing statute, chapter 79, title 29, chapters 21, 23, title 31, Braille literacy rights and education in chapter 2, title 14, the state appropriations in chapter 17, title 14, statewide contracts under chapter 96, title 16. And we've also had conversations about the State Rehabilitation Council is not codified, and looking into that.
Okay. And you'll send those over to our staff?
I certainly can. I think they're included in the information that Amanda's made available.
Okay. And what exactly does equity mean to you as the director of DVI?
That's a very good question. I think equity to me means that everyone is accessing all information, that they have equal opportunities, and that they get to make choices for themselves that are not decided on by other people. So that's a really difficult question to answer. I guess in my head, I have an idea in my head. How it relates to us as a division, I can be very, very honest with you and say that we currently operate with a case management system that is not accessible to someone who is blind. And I have a real problem with that. And so we are looking at how to upgrade our system. And that's not necessarily a cost neutral thing to do, but it would never, we have had opportunities to employ people who are blind, and we would provide whatever accommodations were necessary in order to ensure that they had employment opportunities with us. And we want to ensure that it's not just DVI, but that is something that's accessible to people across the state. I think that equity is a much broader issue than just disabilities and accommodations, and making sure that people can access our services based on nothing but the fact that they qualify and are interested to participate. And so for our division, making ourselves available to everyone who qualifies, going into areas where maybe access is more difficult, and finding a way to reach people that doesn't require them to come out and find us, but for us to go out and help them is extremely important. So we are still working through a lot of that. I think our organizational development initiative is helping us to explore some of those options, and our comprehensive statewide needs assessment, one major focus on that is helping to identify underrepresented and underserved populations to ensure that we're including them in our programming. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it is a really good question. And I think that it's something that we're taking very seriously at DVI.
And finally, with the answer that you just gave to my previous question, is there space to ensure that someone who's visually impaired could rise to leadership, excuse me, to a leadership position in your office?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And are you working toward trying to make that happen?
I would love to see that happen. I absolutely, DVI is small. We don't have a lot of positions. And so I think that there's room for us to grow. I think there's opportunity for us to grow. And I think that there are many people at DVI who have shown, exceptional leadership skills. There are many people in the community that show exceptional skills. And I think that we would, we're looking for qualified people all the time, especially those who come with lived experience.
Thank you.
Senator Gay, we have Representative Griffith. Do you have your hand up again?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm always I have always a lot of questions. I did ask you, Ms. Miller, about the number of 35 individuals still looking for employment. What is on the flip side, could you let me know what the number of successful placements that you have? How many people currently are employed in a full-time capacity?
I believe that we currently have 7. And that's so looking, if I'm talking about information that our data that we've gathered from the beginning of our program year, which starts July 1. And so year-to-date information, we have 4 who've actually achieved a successful competitive outcome, which means that they have been working for at least 90 days or longer. And then we have 7 who have achieved employment, but maybe have not reached the full 90 days. So for
7 private for the state and private?
Yes. So that's all of our employment outcomes for this year. It's not been a great year.
And the pandemic, we can, that might have something to do with it. But what about working from home opportunities? Because now that limit, that removes some of the pandemic, in a sense, has made opportunities easier for working from home. So are there also trainings underway to help individuals work from home to gain employment?
So, so absolutely. I think that, I mean, I do actually think that we're going to find that there are a lot of opportunities that have come out of the last year. In some cases, people have had to transition from being in an office to working from home, and they might actually have come back to VR to get some supports because they need some additional technology or they need some sort of assistance to transition over to a different way of working. Or their employer has reached out for some assistance. But I do absolutely think that there's going to be more opportunity for people to work from home. There's always been work from home employment types of opportunities. Some of them are not necessarily going to pay the bills, and some of them are, very legitimate, great opportunities for people. It really comes down to what the individual is interested in, and so that's really what drives the boat.
And one follow-up to that, how many organizations is your agency working with for employment?
So in terms of like placement providers?
Yes.
So we put an RFP out this past summer, and we got two who provide placement services. We have others who provide training, and the two agencies that answered the RFP have quite an array of services that they provide. So they do supported employment, they do competitive employment, they provide work-based learning opportunities, pre-employment transition services. So they're working the whole gamut, but we only had two providers that answered our RFP. So we're hoping we're going to be doing another RFP again this year, and we're hoping that we'll be able to gain some additional providers through that process.
Okay. And finally, with the 14 to 21 population, how aggressively are you working with that group to inform them and ready them for higher education opportunities? And what types of, and how much financial benefit, if someone is interested in higher ed, is there for someone who's visually impaired, both at Del Tech, Delaware State, UD, and universities and college outside of Delaware?
So, we're very fortunate that we have our education program as well as our VR program, because we work very closely on much of the programming that's offered through the summer, at spring break, different events that our education program puts on for the students. Our VR program collaborates with, all of our programs do, but there's been a much bigger push over the last years to ensure that VR and education are working together. We also have to make sure that our VR programs working with the education, our districts, because not everything is going to come from our internal education program. So in that regard, many of our TVIs are teachers of the visually impaired. Many of them know the goals and the plans of the students that they're working with. And so it's a great way for our TVIs and our VR counselors to work together to continue that support. We had, I think, the largest number of students graduate last year who went on for higher education. I think we had like maybe 12 or 14 students graduate and go on to higher education. A lot of the students do end up going on for higher education. So that's a significant area of support that we provide. In terms of funding, there is a financial element to VR when it comes to things outside of what is required for someone with a visual impairment. So if it's disability related, then it's really not going to have any kind of financial eligibility requirements. But for tuition or transportation, stuff like that, in those cases, we would be looking at financial need. However, we also help them explore scholarships, looking at the SEED program. There's also a lot of financial aid opportunities for folks, but the whole financial policy is very flexible based on that individual and their needs. So we do provide a lot of support with regard to training and education.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Representative Dorsey Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Miller, just really quickly, you mentioned something about the pre-employment transition. And if I remember correctly, there was a grant for that. And you just mentioned that you only received two entities were sent you a response to the RFP. Does that mean that you had to return some of the grant funding that you received for the pre-employment training?
So pre-employment transition services in 2014, when WIOA was signed into law, the VR grant that was provided to programs across the country changed in the sense that pre-employment transition services was a new requirement under the grant, and 15% of the grant that states were already getting had to be used for, excuse me, 5 core pre-employment transition services. So it wasn't an additional grant, it was part of the VR grant that states already received. They were limited in the sense that they could only spend the 15% on 5 specific services that really had not been provided to kids who were 14 to 21 prior to WIOA. So states had to shift pretty quickly in order to put things in place that would allow them to offer these opportunities for students. And there are a lot of, it is, if you are providing the service, you can use money towards it. DVI has been in a position, what I mean by that is if you, like, you can't pay for transportation, you can't pay for all these other things, you can pay for the service related to work-based learning opportunities, counseling on higher education, very specific targeted items. So DVI is in a position where many of our staff actually provide the service directly. And so the only way that we could track it was based on the staff's salary. There wasn't a dollar amount attached to that. So within the last couple of years, we did start working with providers so that they developed programs or they worked with us on our summer programming to offer pre-employment transition services during the times that we had students together for other activities. And that was also a big part of our RFP. So yes, we have 2 providers who are specifically designed, or have designed programs for pre-ETs. DVI has had to return funding because we have not been able to spend all of the 15% that is set aside specifically for that purpose. That is not unique to Delaware. Many blind agencies across the country have had to do the same thing. General agencies, on the other hand, are in the other boat where they have so many students that are in the age range of 14 to 21 that they tend to spend more and oftentimes have to go on to an order of selection, which is a waiting list, because they go well beyond the 15% to provide those pre-ed services because you can't really deny them. So that's why we put our pre-ETs policy into place. We have a fiscal forecast, which now allows us to use some of that funding towards some additional services. They're authorized activities, which that has not been in place prior to this year. We also are tracking staff time so that we can actually use pre-ETs money, the pre-ETs reserve towards staff time. So we have put things in place. That's part of the reason we've been receiving technical assistance from the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center, is to utilize as much of that 15% as we possibly can. We also recently hired the pre-ETs coordinator that I mentioned, where we repurposed a couple of positions within VR. The pre-ETs coordinator, that person, a majority of their salary will be able to be used towards the pre-ETs reserve because they're almost entirely, their whole job is really to coordinate, develop, and help students get access to those pre-employment transition services. If it's not the 2 providers who do it, it'll be our staff, it'll be individualized services that we're able to use that count their time towards. So we're really trying to look at every which way that we can to not return the money. Of course, we don't want to return the money, but we also can't use the money for any other purpose. Unfortunately, they don't allow you to do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Representative Dorsey Walker. Representative Johnson, do you want to ask a question next?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Miller, thank you so much for all of this information. It's a whole lot. So thank you.
Sure.
I have maybe two questions, but I'll just start with one. This is related to the RFP that you guys put out. You said that you only had 2 providers who responded to your RFP. Do you have a sense as to why only 2 providers responded?
We actually had 3. One was all for training programs, so they don't provide job placement or any of that. 2 for local community rehabilitation programs. So we started out working with the general agency because we had the ability to access the providers that they work with and just sort of piggyback off of their contracts. However, it really, we weren't getting the feedback from all of the providers that we had hoped for. We weren't getting engagement with the providers the way that we'd hoped for. And so that's why we decided to do the RFP on our own, because we thought that way we would have the ability to work much more directly and more specifically around the services that we felt we needed as a division. So I think some of the issue is we have often in the past done all of our own services. So I think providers, are hesitant to answer an RFP if they're afraid they're not going to get any referrals. And so we do believe that is one part of the problem. It's a lot of work answering an RFP. It's a lot of work ensuring you have staff and services available. And then not to have anyone participate in those isn't great. So I think that's one piece of it. So we're working to establish a relationship and to show that, our staff are working more with our providers. The other part of it is working with individuals who are blind or visually impaired, as I mentioned in my presentation. It does really require some specialized skills. And that isn't always what a lot of the provider staff have had a lot of experience with. And so what we talked with the providers about and what we have talked with our own staff about is, we need to play that role for them to be the conduit between making sure that they understand the accommodations, the equipment, the technology, and understanding that visual impairment so that they'll learn through the process. I mean, quite frankly, having been a provider in another state and working with providers in my previous job, they have an incredible amount of skill and talent working with people with disabilities. Visual impairments tends to be the one that they don't know that well. And partly our fault because we haven't relied on them and we haven't worked with them as much. So we feel there's a great opportunity here to provide that education and that link to working more successfully with our folks, and that we need to be part of that process. We don't just hand the person over, make the referral and say, okay, go get them a job. But we need to be active participants along with the consumer and those providers so that, the person's served the best they can be. Okay, so then my next question, I'm thinking, is not applicable based upon your response, because I was going to ask that, since the response rate was so low, would you be considering changing any of the specifications related to the RFP? But what I heard you say is that it's more about people's assumptions, maybe, their concerns related to whether or not they're even going to receive any referrals, because historically you guys have provided those services to your people. So they're like really apprehensive. And yes, responding to an RFP is a lot of work. So the good thing is that you are aware of that. And I believe that I heard you say that you guys are going to work towards closing that gap and supporting them and having a relationship with the providers and, maybe, really providing them some education as well so that they will feel more comfortable with the clientele that you support. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great opportunity for education. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. And our numbers are small, so if they have a lot of work and they're working with, other organizations, the RFP is a pretty cumbersome process if they can't guarantee they're going to get a lot of work from us.
I can relate to that. Absolutely. I think that Those are the only questions I had. Thank you so much for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. And Director Miller, I just had a quick question. Being as you're a small agency, being as you're focused on individualized services, how well do you think you're doing as an agency at educating some potential partners or stakeholders in the community about the scope of your services and where people can find you if they need to refer someone?
I think we can do a lot more towards that. Some of it is getting more information on our website. We have talked about, and again, this goes back to, this is why that organizational development initiative is so important to me, because I think there are so many aspects of, and I think you probably noticed in my presentation, there's so many things that are relevant to so many of the different recommendations, and they all kind of work together. So it's kind of hard to tease it all out and not feel like I was repeating myself, but there's a lot more that we can do. I started my career when I moved to Delaware at DVI, and I definitely know that in the 17 years I've been in Delaware, that there still is so much either misunderstanding or just people not understanding that we even, have services to the degree that we do. We want people, again, before the pandemic, we were asking people to come in and go through our sensitivity training. Come see, I didn't even talk about our materials center, which produces the materials for the K through 12 students. We have a whole production facility in our building here at Biggs, and the work that's done is so technical, but it's amazing to see our staff in action. And so to actually experience it is a very different thing. To go and see the library of Braille books that we have down the hallway is really impactful. And to identify with the fact that a student who might, have a book that's this big, that, any other student, a sighted student, is going to put in their backpack, and then our students carrying maybe a foot or two of Braille books that aren't going to fit in their backpack. Unless you see that and experience it and understand it, it's very difficult to understand the impact that vision loss can have on a person. And so safe travel, education services, being able to live independently in your home, being able to work and have the technology you need and have the training that you need, those are really important. And our agency does all of that. And so we have a long way to go with getting the information out there, but is absolutely on our radar, and that is absolutely what we need to do. And we feel that there is an awful lot of outreach that we can continue to do. And unfortunately, this past year has made it a lot more difficult, to carry out some of the things that we had talked about initially after we had our last meeting with this committee. But we are still working through, and planning to carry out some of those activities. So there's a lot of information that still needs to be shared.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that, anyone here would be an open door for you to talk about how we can help any agency work towards better serving our citizens. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited to see where this goes. And so if I don't see any more hands up at the moment, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amanda, who's going to share a brief update on some of the materials that were provided to the committee earlier.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and take. Okay. I think everyone can see my presentation, correct?
We can see it.
Awesome. Thank you. So, all right. So I'm going to take the committee through kind of the next steps. The first thing I'm going to just go over is the holdover contents, the document that was sent out on Friday to committee members. And this information will be on the committee's website after this meeting, since we're going to be running a little late. Well, not late, but past 4:30. It'll be on there tomorrow for the public. And these were just the contents. So we had DVI, Ms. Miller just went over the July and December update. So I'm going to just go over the overview just for context to kind of familiarize everyone that where we're at in this review process for DVI. So I was selected for review by the committee June 12th, 2018. And then a draft report was completed and the presentation meeting was held in 2019, March and April, where public comment was taken. And then May 9th of 2019, we had recommendations. There were 28 that were tabled and 3 adopted, which included creating the task force. So in the meeting documents that were sent out on Friday in that supplement, there's a overview of the task force and what happened with that. And I realize we have a lot of new members, so that was provided to try to catch you up, and I can certainly ask or answer any questions. So the task force meetings were held through August through December of 2019, and we had public comment there as well. And then we had the holdover meetings, which occurred last year, January, and then the recommendations were adopted in February of 2020. Now, the presentation that Ms. Miller presented is all the updates on the progress that DVI has made on the recommendations. And those recommendations centered on some key areas such as the statute, staffing, policy, funding, communication, and education services. So those were the things that were touched on the most. And that came from the research process and all the input in the task force process. So in the packet, the legislation, which was mentioned earlier, we have 2 pieces. We have recommendation 2, which is the general statutory updates and technical corrections. So that's something you're going to see with every review that comes through the committee, is we usually write a recommendation to go through and make, technical corrections and updates. And then because DVI and the research process and with the task force, it was identified that a lot of the updates were needed that were going to be a lot larger than just technical corrections. So that's where you have recommendation 3, which is where we're in the process of working right now. The process with staff is we work together with the entity to put together those drafts. So the pandemic kind of put that process on hold. So now we're in the process of picking that back up and working with DVI, and of course that's attached to DHSS, to put that legislation together. And then those elements are identified in recommendation 3, such as the governing statute, the Braille literacy rights and education, and then the BEP provisions, which, as mentioned, we got the House Bill 301 passed at the end of last session, and that was to help the blind vendors to get them out of the pension code because they were not supposed to be in the pension code. It was a rub with the federal regulations, so that was fixed. So as of right now, that's the only piece of legislation that the committee moved forward with. So now we're in the process of picking it back up. So the drafting process, as you are all aware, can take some time. So that can continue without further progress monitoring like what just occurred, because when the recommendations were adopted in February of last year, the committee asked DVI to submit progress updates, and that was progress on all of those recommendations. So if the committee, what we're going to move forward with is the recommendations. I don't know if you've had a chance to read them in full, but they were provided in the packet, and I have them here on the screen. I realize it's probably a little small, but there were 13 in total. Sorry, I'm going to skip through here. There were 13 in total. So that was what was just presented, was the updates on each one. So some of these have already been adopted, like recommendation 1 is always the standard recommendation to continue or terminate, because that's the purpose of review with the committee, is to make sure that there's a genuine public need for the entity and to vote on that. So that's been adopted already. Well, I'm sorry, they've all been adopted already, but you heard the progress on all of them. So that's where we're at now. And so if the committee, what the job of the committee now is to discuss if they're satisfied with the progress presented on all the recommendations. And if they're satisfied with that, the options are to continue to hold the entity or to release with conditions. So in my recommendation, I have it written as DVI is released from review. Oops, sorry. is released with a condition upon enactment of making technical corrections under recommendation 2. And then you're free to discuss that and decide, if you want a different recommendation. The committee's free to vote on what your pleasure is. But just as an analyst, going through everything, all the updates that was received by DVI, the top concerns that were raised during the task force process included the agency turnover. Sorry, I keep playing with my screen and I keep covering up things, sorry. But agency turnover, education, and accessibility of offices. And the progress shows that DVI has really focused on strengthening agencies internally, the agency internally and externally by building better policies, trainings, and communications. They've developed more community outreach, which was a concern, and also the accessibility, and they've partnered with Georgetown Public Library, and they're continuing work with that Equitable Infrastructure Committee, which is helping with funding. So the drafting of legislation will continue, as I mentioned, between staff and DVI, your staff and DVI, and that will that can continue without further monitoring, and it allows for further oversight to continue, even though you've released, if you release the agency for review. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but that's what I have. Like I said, I realize it's a lot of information that has went over, but and half of the committee is jumping into a process that's been 3 years in the making. Senator Pettyjohn.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm not sure if you would entertain a motion now or if you want to wait.
I'm happy to entertain a motion. Perhaps let's just see if there are any questions about the process from members of the committee. I know some folks are, including myself, are new to the committee this year. Representative Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand. So am I correct that unlike other committee hearings, because public comment has already, the opportunity for public comment has already been given, that this meeting itself is not an opportunity for further comment? Is that how the process works, so that the public comment section for our review, and I see that from your presentation, Amanda, like that occurred already. So this is not a time for new comment. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so we did provide an opportunity for additional written comment. And I will let Amanda provide any other detail, but yes, this is because it's a holdover meeting, just the structure and the logistics here are different than some of the meetings we'll have as early as this week.
Thank you. And I think that's helpful for anyone who's listening to, who, again, because we're picking up from where we left off, and it's also COVID, that helps those who might be joining us via Zoom. Thank you so much.
No, you're right. And thank you for bringing that up. Representative Johnson.
Thank you. So a 3-year process. This is a long, a long time. My question is for Debbie and for Sandra. So have you been a part of this process the entire time? How long have you been employed at DVR?
So I can answer. I've been with DVI for 6 years, but I was in a different capacity. So yes, I was involved in going to the hearings and stuff, but so for myself, no, I wasn't involved full time in this process until last February. And Sandy?
I think we received the letter that we were going under sunset review about maybe 3 weeks after I started as deputy director in 2018. So I've been part of this process the whole time.
I got my appointment letter February 24th. So I think Sandy got her director appointment letter on February 24th as well.
Wow. All right. I was just curious about that. And full disclosure for my committee members, I asked that question because I know both of these ladies because of my other life.
Yeah.
I was trying to put it together in my head. I'm like, well, wait, where have they been? And were they here all this time? And I just couldn't figure out the year. So I just thought stop asking or stop trying to, figure it out in my head. So the other question is that since you have been, Sandy, you said pretty much the entire time as far as the review is concerned. My question is, outside of, having the recommendations and doing the follow-up and making the corrections, what would you say have been your biggest takeaways from this process? Just, I'm curious.
No, I think I said it in the meeting we had last February that, the recommendations, there was a lot of work that was going to be required over the last year. And I will say it again, it's all work that we know we need to do. And so this isn't done. It's not going to be done. And I feel as though this past year has given us a significant amount of foundation in order to establish, ourselves at the baseline and continue to move ourselves up. And we had a lot of work to do to get there. And so we have a lot of work to get where we really need to be. But I believe that the recommendations that were made, I still believe that the recommendations that were made were exactly what DVI needed to do. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but I think that this is, this is the kind of work that DVI needs in order to establish itself and become the agency that is well known and respected in the community.
You answered my question, and not only did you answer my question, you answered the question as a leader should. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And Senator Pennyjohn, I think this would be a good time to make that motion if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we move DVI be released from sunset review upon enactment of the legislation under recommendation number 2.
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion by Senator Pennyjohn, a second by Representative Spiegelman to release with contingencies. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Okay. Hearing none, if everyone in favor could please signify by your silence, and all those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion has passed. Thank you very much to those of you from DVI, Director Miller and Ms. Talley. Thank you so much to the staff for this long process, which I know is still continuing, and we will continue to work in the background to wrap it up. But your hard work and your pages and pages of preparatory material do not go unnoticed by the members of this committee. I would like to note for everyone here and those watching that our next meeting will be tomorrow, Wednesday, February 10th at 3 p.m. via Zoom for the Delaware Interscholastic Athletic Association presentation, as well as recommendations for DNREC Conservation District operations. If there are no other questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
to our staff.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Weren't we supposed to like hang on for a few minutes, and everybody just bailed?
You're supposed to be quiet for 30 seconds too there, Jeff.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, come on.
Are we off?
Who's there from DTI managing the stream?
Oh, they quit on us. They quit on us an hour ago.
All right, we're clear. All right, yeah, and whoever is managing DTI tomorrow, perhaps let's remind everyone to stick around for just 30 seconds. But